Richard, Kaylin, and Zed are under attack from a pair of short-tailed Gars. Richard is saved from total destruction by the cat in his backpack. Richard is struck from behind, knocked over, and clawed in the back. The Gar pounces on him and knocks the wind out of him, pinning him to the ground, keeping him from drawing the Sword of Truth to defend himself. All Richard can do is cover up and try to protect himself. He also sees Zed knocked off balance, tumbling into the woods with the other Gar in pursuit. Kaylin throws a bunch of rocks at the Gar on top of Richard. The Gar takes no damage but is angered by this. Richard feels crushed by the weight of the beast and tries to use force to fight his way free, but he cannot because his strength is not sufficient to complete the task in that way. Richard pulls fur from the Gar and is bitten by blood flies. Richard is able to get free when Kaylin breaks the stalemate by throwing rocks at the Gar. Even though the rocks don't have the power to hurt the Gar, she's able to make the Gar angry enough to give up its advantage and attack her instead. Once the Gar responds to the harmless rocks, it uses a portion of that strength to attack Kaylin, snatching her up and holding her by the hair. The cat leaps into action, biting and scratching the eyes and face of the Gar. Richard manages to escape from the Gar and rolls to his feet, drawing the Sword of Truth. With a mighty swing, he brings the weapon down and severs the arm holding Kaylin just before he is once again sent flying back from a mighty counterstrike. Reeling from the force of the blow, Richard realizes he has just lost his bearing as well as his grip on the Sword of Truth. While he is attempting to get oriented, Richard is blindsided by the force of Zed's release of magic, which is strong enough to knock the Gar from its feet by concussive force alone and fling him into a nearby tree. Richard searches for the sword, and while he can't see it, once his anger ignites, he's able to sense its location and scrambles to reach it. But before he can gain his grasp on the weapon, the Gar kicks him in the side so hard he loses all sense of direction, breaking his ribs in the process. Richard fights through the pain and dives for the sword, but he is caught at the last moment and held by his ankle, upside down as the Gar wraps its rings around him, drawing him close. Richard's only recourse is kicking the bloody stump of the Gar so it drops him. While Richard momentarily is free, Zed unleashes the power of Wizard's Fire and incinerates the Gar completely, leaving nothing behind. The fight is over and Richard is wounded. He says the Gar kicked him in his left side and now it hurts to breathe. Richard tells Zed he's having trouble breathing, and Zed pulls the same, looking at Richard's injury and acting like it isn't life-threatening thing that it is, that he uses in Chapter 6, to tell Richard, oh, it can't be that bad since there are no bones sticking out. Richard turns to Zed and says, don't even act like that giant fireball wasn't actual magic, and Zed says he's not going to act like that giant fireball wasn't actual magic. Zed also says that if Darkenrahl was watching, he would have been able to see it too. While Zed is trying to stabilize Richard's condition, Kaylin touches Richard's hand and he experiences a powerful warning that surges through the Sword of Truth. Richard recognizes the magic is trying to warn him of serious danger. Zed tells Richard that 3 of his ribs are injured and he's going to put some magic around them to keep them strong until they can finish healing on their own. Zed gets to cheat a little bit and use his magic to overcome the limitations of modern medicine through a little bit of hocus pocus. Zed talks to Richard in a calm and soothing voice, telling him he's putting magic around them, and the words seem to mean less, and after a time, Richard felt like he was waking from a sleep, feeling much better but not completely healed. Richard gets up, thanks Zed and the cat, feeling strong enough to worry about the wounds on his back later. When Zed and Kaylin aren't looking, Richard takes the tooth from around his neck and slips it into his pocket faster than a crooked tax collector's cut of the action on the great communal day of shared sacrifice. The 3 continue their journey, and Richard leads them down a small path. Zed uses sparkle dust to cover their tracks, and all of them have a careful eye looking to the sky to make sure they aren't taken off guard again. After traveling by moonlight, Richard arrives at Chase's house and is stopped by a heavy wooden oak door with iron strap hinges. While Richard is standing at the door, we learn Zed and Kaylin were left behind because Chase's privacy fence has more spikes than a porcupine making sweet love to a sea urchin. Right as Richard is about to knock on the door, he's grabbed by the hair and has a knife pressed against his throat, causing him to freeze. Richard identifies himself by asking the person with a knife to his throat is Chase. And Chase accuses Richard of trying to get himself killed by sneaking up on a Navy SEAL's private residence in the middle of the night instead of knocking on the gate. Richard insists that it was only his intention not to wake the man's family, which caused him to put himself in needless moral peril. Chase says to Richard, "There's blood all over you. How much of it is yours?" Richard says, "Don't worry about it," and pays Chase back for putting a knife to his throat by making him walk to unlock the gate and let Zed and Kaylin inside. Taking full advantage of the fact that in his haste to protect his home and family, by forcing him to walk on twigs and acorns in his bare feet, as Chase did not have time to put on the same kind of travel boots that Richard was already wearing, when Richard would have been fully capable of opening the gate himself. Chase leads the three of them inside his home, and we're introduced to the supporting character of Emma Bradstone, who is described as a compassionate, considerate, but also practical woman who isn't bothered by much of anything. Emma starts making everyone tea, and the author tells us that it isn't unusual for people covered in blood to show up in the middle of the night. While the tea is cooking, Richard takes Cat out of his pack and puts it on Kaylin's lap, reducing the number of total cats in Richard's backpack to 0. Emma removes a bowl of apples on the table and replaces it with a pot of tea and honey for everyone to drink. This tells us that either the table is too small for 5 adults to sit with cups of tea and a bowl full of apples, or that the Bradstone family has recognized a recent shortage of nearby apples and doesn't want their guests to reduce their already limited supply. Little do they know, sitting next to them in Richard's pack is enough apples to feed their entire family for almost 2 months. Emma makes all the women in the audience happy when she tells Richard to take his shirt off so she can focus on cleaning the wounds in his back. With the camera's unrelenting focus on his six-pack ab muscles and his chiseled jaw, we're shown Richard's sensitive side as he almost starts crying from having a stiff brush rooting around the open wounds on his back. After drying the wound, she applies a healing salve to it while Chase ends the heart-throbbing, shirtless Richard portion of this chapter. Emma asks, would anyone like something to eat? And in spite of almost getting killed 3 times in one evening, Zed says, well, I wouldn't mind. But Richard and Kaylin are having none of that noise and use their body language to bully Zed into going hungry for the evening. Chase tells Richard that he's worried about him because he's been nearly killed 5 times in the last 4 days. But he's interrupted by one of his children waking up to see what's all this about then, with strange people coming in at an even stranger time of the night. Chase makes faces at his own progeny, a skill which she then demonstrates her own mastery of, before he calls her ugly. He gives her a hug and sends her back to bed. But before she can leave, Zed takes his revenge for not being fed by pulling the old, hello there, little one. I have this fluffy and wonderful cat I want to give you, and he will be sad if you don't say yes and agree to love him, right in front of the girl's parents without any regard for their personal policies about pet ownership. And it works. And then Chase's daughter pulls the old, let me handle this one, Mom and Dad. He can stay with us, and I'll love him and feed him and give him pets. And this works, too. While all of this is going on, Richard asks Emma if he can borrow some travel clothing for Kaylin. Emma doesn't comment on the fact that she will never see her daughter's beloved outfits again, and takes her, Kaylin, to the room so she can see if they can find something that will fit her. Once all the girls leave the room, Emma knowingly closes the door so Richard and Zed can talk with Chase about some serious business. Richard mentions the conspiracy that his brother was talking about being worse than he knows. Chase plays hard to get, giving Richard no choice but to unsheathe his sword, whip it out, and lay it right there on the table in front of him in full view of everyone. Chase leans forward on his elbows and lifts it with his fingertips, rolling it in his palms, inspecting it closely, carefully, running his fingers over it. Chase pretends not to be impressed, even though he really is. Richard tells him that he knows Chase has seen it before, and he can stop pretending like he doesn't know exactly what he has right in front of him. Chase admits that it's true, but until now he could only admire it from a distance, and this was his first opportunity to get a good, hard look at it this closely. Chase adopts a dark and intense expression when he says, the point is, Richard, what are you doing with it? Richard cryptically says, with a penetrating gaze, that a wizard gave it to him. Chase doesn't understand and asks Zed what he has to do with all this. Zed can only lean closer, and when he says, I'm the one who gave it to him, Chase leans back from both of them, shaking his head in disbelief. And while he doesn't mention God at all, he does praise the spirits in front of it, and seems very pleased to have the real deal staring him right in the face on his own dining room table. Chase withholds comment, and Richard recognizes that he's waiting for someone to say something more consequential. Richard spills all the beans and tells Chase to tell him about the boundary. In a moment of heroic stoicism, Chase gets up and walks over to the fireplace, staring soulfully into the flames while he thinks big person, quiet, brooding thoughts. Finally, Chase asks his lifelong close and personal friend if he knows what he does for a living. And Richard gives him the perfectly acceptable response, keeping people away from the boundary for their own good. Chase shakes his head and asks the survival expert and woods guide with decades of experience if he knows how to get rid of wolves. Richard says, "You hunt them." And Chase says, "You sweet, naive, beautiful, beautiful man. You would only succeed at destroying part of the world's population that way. And that the real secret to an extinction-level campaign is through mass starvation, by hunting their food supply." And Chase describes the different kinds of people who try to get too close to the boundary and what their rationale is. His main point is making people afraid of the boundary wardens, keeping enough of them away so the things that live in the boundary don't get stronger. Chase goes on to say it is his sacred duty to protect people from the things that come out of the darkness. Chase says the boundary wardens follow orders when they have to keep the peace, but their real higher power is the one true seeker because his goals align with their goals. Chase pledges his life in defense of the seeker, and Richard spends the next few minutes giving his friend the top 20 countdown of their greatest hits from the last few days. Chase is moved to tears by the retelling of Zed's story about convincing the angry mob they were castrati. Once these three men are done acting like the most important people in the room, the door opens and Kaylin becomes the most important person in the room. We see an upgrade in Kaylin's clothing from a ceremonially significant but highly impractical white dress into a full set of travel gear. A good shirt, a nice belt, a nice backpack, great pants. Kaylin has a much better sense in shoes than Emma does, as she chooses to keep her own boots in favor of any hypothetical boots she may or may not have been offered to her off camera. Richard lets Chase know that Kaylin is their guide. Now that Kaylin and Emma have entered the room, Richard finally sheathes his sword, giving the impression that he is fine having it on display in front of his two male, close, personal, lifelong friends. Not that there's anything wrong with that. One of which happens to be his grandfather. And there's nothing wrong with that either, because this entire time it's always been the sword of truth and not his penis. Chase listens to the rest of the story and then says, "This is all great, but what can I do as one man to help?" Richard says, 1, where's the pass? And 2, give me the pass. Richard's advanced interrogation techniques pay off because he shocks Chase into overplaying his hand when he doth protest about a pass too much. But Chase plays hard to get, and Richard gets angry at him. Richard's new ability to show some damn anger once in a while is something that Chase can appreciate because the situation calls for it. And since Richard showed him his sword, he will personally show him what he has to offer. Richard tries to think of the children when he tells Chase it's too dangerous for him to get involved, but Chase isn't having any of that noise and says it's his way or the highway. Richard realizes he has little choice and knows he can't change his friend's mind by force and accepts Chase's offer to help. Chase tells us the name of the pass is the King's Port in a tough place called South Haven. Chase tells us it's a 4 to 5 day ride along the very same Hawker's Trail that Richard and Kaylin encountered the quad on. Chase tells his friends to get some sleep while he prepares supplies for their journey.